didn't think it polite to listen, sir.
Oh, well, I'm sorry for that. For your sake. I don't play accurately. Anyone can play accurately, but I play with wonderful expression. As far as the piano is concerned, sentiment is my forte. I keep signs for life.
Yes, sir.
And speaking of the signs of life, have you got the cucumber sandwiches cut for Lady Bracknell?
Yes, sir.
Oh, by the way, Lane, I see from your book here that on Thursday night, when Lord Shorman and Mr. Worthing were dining with me, 8 bottles of champagne are entered as having been consumed?
Yes, sir. 8 bottles and a pint.
Why is it that in a bachelor's establishment, the servants invariably drink the champagne? I merely ask for information.
I attribute it to the superior quality of the wine, sir. I've often observed that in married households, the champagne is rarely a first-rate brand.
Good heavens, is marriage so demoralizing as that?
It is a very pleasant state, sir. I have very little experience of it myself. I've only been married once, and that was in consequence of a misunderstanding between myself and a young person.
I don't know that I'm much interested in your family life, Lane.
No, sir, it is not a very interesting subject. I rarely think of it myself.
Very natural. That will do, Lane. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Lane's views on marriage seem somewhat lax. I mean, really, if the lower orders don't set a good example for us, what on earth is the use of them? They seem to me as a class to have absolutely no sense of moral responsibility.
Mr. Ernest Worthing.
Ernest, my dear fellow, what brings you up to town?
Oh, pleasure, pleasure. What else should bring anyone anywhere? Eating as usual, I see, Algie.
I believe it is customary in good society to take some slight refreshment at 5 o'clock. Where have you been since last Thursday?
In the country.
What on earth do you do there?
When one is in town, one amuses oneself, and when one is in the country, one must amuse other people. It's excessively boring.
And who are the people you amuse?
Neighbors, neighbors.
Got nice neighbors in your part of Shropshire.
Perfectly horrid. Never speak one of them.
By the way, Shropshire is your county, is it not?
Eh? Shropshire? Yes, sure. Hello, why all these cups? Why cucumber sandwiches? Why such reckless extravagance in one so young? Who's coming to tea, Algie?
Merely Aunt Augusta and Gwendolen.
How perfectly delightful.
Yes, that's all very well, but I don't think Aunt Augusta will quite approve of your being here.
May I ask why?
My dear fellow, the way you flirt with Gwendolen is perfectly disgraceful. It's almost as bad as the way Gwendolen flirts with you.
I'm in love with Gwendolen. I've come to town expressly to propose to her.
Oh? I thought you'd said you'd come up on pleasure. I call that business.
How utterly unromantic you are.
Well, I really don't see anything romantic in proposing. It's very romantic to be in love, but there is nothing romantic about a definite proposal. Why, one may be accepted. One usually is, I believe. And then the excitement is all over. The very essence of romance is uncertainty. Whenever I get married, I shall certainly try to forget the fact.
I've no doubt about that. The divorce courts were specially invented for people whose memories are so curiously constituted.
There's no use speculating on that. Divorces are in heaven. Please don't touch the cucumber sandwiches. They are ordered for Aunt Augusta specially.
You've been eating them all the time.
Well, that's quite a different matter. She's my aunt. Have some bread and butter. The bread and butter is for Gwendolen, and Gwendolen is devoted to bread and butter.
And very good bread and butter it is, too.
My dear fellow, you need not eat as if you were going to eat at all. You act as if you're married to her already. You're not married to her already, and I don't think you ever shall be.
Well, why on earth do you say that?
Well, in the first place, girls never marry the men they flirt with. Girls don't think it right.
That's nonsense.
It isn't. It is a great truth. It accounts for the extraordinary number of bachelors one sees all over the place. Besides, I don't give my consent.
Your consent?
My dear fellow, Gwendolen is my first cousin, and before I allow you to marry her, you'll have to clear up the whole question of Cecily.
Cecily? What do you mean, Algie Cecily? Why on earth do you say Cecily? I know no one by the name of Cecily.
Please bring me that cigarette case Mr. Worthing left in the smoking room the last time he dined here.
Yes, sir.
Do you mean to say you've had my cigarette case this entire time? I wish to goodness you'd let me know. I've been writing frantic letters to Scotland Yard about it. I was very near ready to offer a large reward.
Oh, well, I wish you would offer one. I happen to be more than usually hard up.
There's no good offering a large reward now the thing is found.
I think that rather mean of you, Ernest, I must say. However, it makes for no matter, for now that I look in the inscription on the inside, I find the thing isn't yours after all.
What do you mean it's not mine? You've seen me with it 100 times. And you've no right whatsoever to read what's written inside. It's a very ungentlemanly thing to read a private cigarette case.
It was very absurd to have a hard and fast rule about what one should and shouldn't read. Half the modern culture depends on what one shouldn't read.
Yes, I'm well aware of the fact, but I don't propose to discuss modern culture. It's not the sort of thing one discusses in private. I simply want my cigarette case back.
Yes, but this isn't your cigarette case. This cigarette case is a present from someone by the name of Cecily. You said you didn't know anyone of that name.
Well, if you want to know, Cecily happens to be my aunt.
Your aunt?
Yes, charming lady she is too. Lives in Tunbridge Wells. Now, just give it back to me, Algie.
But if she is your aunt, and she lives at Tunbridge Wells, then why does she call herself Little Cecily? From Little Cecily, with her fondest love.
My dear fellow, what on earth is there in that? Some aunts are tall, some aunts are not tall. You surely have not. You seem to think that every aunt should be exactly like your aunt, which is absurd. Now, for heaven's sake, give me back my cigarette case.
But why does your aunt call you her uncle? From Little Cecily with her fondest love to dear Uncle Jack. There is no objection, I admit, to an aunt being a small aunt. But why an aunt, no matter what her size may be, should call her own nephew her uncle? I can't quite make out. Besides, her name isn't Jack at all, it's Earnest.
It's not Ernest, it's Jack.
You've always told me it was Earnest. You answer to the name of Earnest. I've introduced you to everyone as Earnest. You look as if your name was Earnest. The most earnest-looking person I ever saw in my life. It's perfectly ridiculous you're saying your name isn't Earnest. It's on your cards. Here's one of them. Mr. Ernest Worthing, B4, the Albany. I think I'll keep this as proof that your name is Ernest if ever you attempt to deny it to me, or to Gwendolen, or to anyone else.
My name is Ernest in town and Jack in the country. The cigarette case was given me in the country.
Yes, but that does not account for the fact that your small Aunt Cecily, who lives at Tunbridge Wells, calls you her dear uncle. Come, old boy, you'd much better have the thing out at once.
Dear fellow, you talk exactly as if you were a dentist. It's very vulgar to talk like a dentist when one isn't a dentist. It produces a false impression.
Now go on, tell me the whole thing. I might mention I've always suspected you of being a confirmed and secret Bunburyist, and I'm quite sure of it now.
Bunburyist? What on earth do you mean, Bunburyist?
I'll reveal to you the meaning of that incomparable expression as soon as you are kind enough to inform me why you are Ernest in town and Jack in the country.
Give me my cigarette case first.
Here it is. Now produce your explanation and pray make it improbable.
My dear fellow, there's nothing improbable about my explanation at all. In fact, it's perfectly ordinary. The old Mr. Thomas Cardew, who adopted me when I was a small boy, left me in his will guardian to his granddaughter, Miss Cecily Cardew. Now, Cecily, who refers to me as uncle for motives of respect that you couldn't possibly begin to appreciate, lives at my place in the country, under the charge of her admirable governess, Miss Prism.
Where is that place in the country, by the way?
It's nothing to you. You're not going to be invited. I may tell you candidly that the place is not in Shropshire.
No, well, I suspected that. I've Bunburyed all over Shropshire, on 2 separate occasions. No, what you really are is a Bunburyist. I was quite right in saying you were a Bunburyist. You're one of the most advanced Bunburyists I know. But go on, why are you Ernest in town and Jack in the country?
Well, honestly, Algie, I don't know if you're going to be able to understand my true motives. You're hardly serious enough. But when one is put in the position of guardian, one must adopt a very high moral tone on all subjects. Well, it's one's duty to do so. That is, a high moral tone can hardly be said to conduce very much to either one's health or to one's happiness. In order to get up to town, I've often pretended to have a younger brother by the name of Ernest, who lives at the Albany and is always getting the most dreadful scrapes. And that, my dear boy, is the whole truth, pure and simple.
The truth is rarely pure and never simple. Modern life would be very tedious if it were either. Modern literature, a complete impossibility.
Wouldn't be at all a bad thing.
Literary criticism is not your forte, my dear fellow. Don't try it. You'd much better leave that to those who haven't been in a university. They do it so well in the daily papers. No, what you really are is a Bunburyist. I was quite right in saying you were a Bunburyist. You are one of the most advanced Bunburyists I know. What do you mean? You have invented a very useful younger brother for yourself by the name of Ernest, so that you may be able to go up to town as often as you like. I have invented an invaluable permanent invalid by the name of Bunbury, so that I may go down to the country whenever I choose. Bunbury is perfectly invaluable. If it weren't for Bunbury's extraordinary bad health, for instance, I wouldn't be able to dine with you at Willis's, for I've really been engaged in Aunt Augusta for over a week.
I haven't asked you to dine with me at Willis's.
I know. You're absurdly careless about sending out invitations. It's very foolish of you. Nothing annoys people so much as not receiving their invitations.
You'd much better dine with your Aunt Augusta.
I haven't the slightest intention of doing anything of the kind. In the first place, I dine there on Monday, and once a week is quite enough to dine with one's own relations. In the second place, whenever I do dine there, I'm always treated as a member of the family, and sent down with either no woman at all or 2. And in the third place, I know perfectly well whom my aunt will sit me next to tonight. She'll place me next to Mary Farquhar, who always flirts with her own husband across the dinner table. That's not very pleasant. Indeed, it's not even decent. And that sort of thing is enormously on the increase. The amount of women in London who flirt with their own husbands is perfectly scandalous. It looks so bad. It's merely washing one's clean linen in public. Besides, now that I know you to be a confirmed Bunburyist, I naturally want to tell you about Bunburying. I want to tell you the rules.
It's not Bunburyist at all. If Gwendolen accepts me, I'm going to kill my brother. Indeed, I think I'll kill him in any case. Cecily's become a little too interested in him as rather a bore, so I'm going to get rid of Ernest, and I suggest you do the same with your invalid friend with the absurd name.
Nothing will be part of Bunbury. And if ever you get married, you'll be very glad to know Bunbury. A man who marries without knowing Bunbury has a very tedious time of it.
That is nonsense. If I marry Gwendolen, she's the only girl I've ever met that I would want to marry, I assure you I won't want to know Bunbury.
Well, then your wife will. You seem to forget that in married life, 3 is company and 2 is none.
That, my young friend, is the theory that the corrupt French drama has been propounding for the last 50 years.
Yes, and a happy English home has proved it half the time.
Don't try to be cynical. It's perfectly easy to be cynical.
My dear fellow, it isn't easy to be anything nowadays. There's such a lot of beastly competition about. Ah, that must be Aunt Augusta. Only relatives or creditors ever ring in that Wagnerian manner. Now, if I get her out of the way for 10 minutes' time so that you may have an opportunity of proposing to Gwendolen, may I dine with you Willis's tonight?
I suppose so, if you want to.
Yes, but you have to be serious about it. I hate people who aren't serious about meals. It's so shallow of them.
Lady Bracknell and Miss Fairfax.
Hello, dear Algernon. I hope you are here.
I'm feeling very well, Aunt Augusta.
There's not quite the same thing, and they rarely go together.
Oh, well, dear me, you're smart.
I am always smart. Am I not, Mr. Worthing?
You're quite perfect, Miss Fairfax.
Oh, I hope I'm not that, for that would leave no room for developments, and I intend to develop in many directions.
I apologize for having been late, dear Algernon, but I was obliged to call on dear Lady Harvey. I hadn't seen her since her poor husband's death. She's quite altered. She looks some 20 years younger. And now I'll have a cup of tea and one of those nice cucumber sandwiches you promised me.
Certainly, Aunt Augusta.
Gwendolen, won't you come sit over here?
Thanks, Mamma. I'm quite comfortable where I am.
Good heavens, Lane! Why are there no cucumber sandwiches? And especially.
There were no cucumbers in the market this morning, sir. I went down twice.
No cucumbers?
No, sir, not even for a ready one.
That will do, Lane. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
It greatly distresses me, Aunt Augusta, that there were no cucumbers in the market this morning. Not even for ready money.
No, it's quite all right, Algernon. I had crumpets with Lady Harvey, who seems to be living entirely for pleasure now.
I hear her hair has turned quite gold from grief.
Her hair has changed colour, but from what cause, I, of course, cannot say.
Thank you.
I have quite a treat for you tonight, Algernon. I'm going to be sending you down with Mary Farquhar. She's such a nice woman. She's so gentle. It's delightful to watch them.
I'm afraid, Aunt Augusta, that I shall have to give up the pleasure of dining with you this evening after all.
I hope not. You would set my whole table completely off. I'd have to send your poor uncle upstairs. Fortunately, he's accustomed to that by now.
It is a great bore, and I need hardly say a terrible disappointment to me. But the fact of the matter is, I have just had a telegram saying that my poor friend Bunbury is very ill. They seem to think I should be with him.
This Mr. Bunbury seems to suffer from curiously bad health.
Yes, poor Bunbury is a dreadful invalid.
Well, if you ask me, it's high time that this Mr. Bunbury made up his mind whether he's going to live or he's going to die. This shilly-shallying about with the question is absurd. Nor do I in any way approve of the modern sympathy for invalids. I consider it morbid. Illness of any kind is hardly something to be desired in others. And health is the primary duty of life. I keep trying to tell that to your poor uncle, but he never seems to take much notice as far as any improvement in his ailment goes. I'd be much obliged if you would call on Mr. Bunbury for me and tell him that I would request that he not have a relapse on Saturday, for I require your assistance in arranging my music. It is my last reception, and one should want something that encourages conversation, particularly at the end of the season when everyone said whatever it is they had to say, which in most cases was probably not much.
I'll speak to Bunbury, Aunt Augusta, if he is still conscious, and I think I can promise you he'll be all right by Saturday. Of course, the music is a great difficulty. You see, if one plays good music, people don't listen. But if one plays bad music, people don't talk. But I'll run over the program I've drawn out for you if you will kindly step into the next room with me for a moment.
Thank you, Algernon. I'm sure a program would be wonderful after a few expurgations. French songs I cannot possibly allow. People seem to think they are improper, and you look shocked, which is vulgar, or laugh, which is worse. But German, I feel, is a thoroughly respectable language, and indeed I believe it is so. Gwendolen, you will accompany me.
Certainly, Mamma.
Charming day it's been, Miss Fairfax.
Pray don't talk to me about the weather, Mr. Wilde. Whenever anybody talks to me about the weather, I'm always quite certain they mean something else. And it makes me so nervous.
I do mean something else.
I thought so. In fact, I'm never wrong.
And I would like to be allowed to take advantage of Lady Bracknell's temporary absence.
I would certainly advise you to do so. Mamma has a habit of coming back suddenly into a room that I've often had to speak to her about.
Miss Fairfax, ever since I met you, I've admired you more than any girl I've ever met since I met you.
Yes, I'm quite well aware of the fact. And I'd often wished that, in public at any rate, you'd been more demonstrative. For me, you've always had an irresistible fascination. Even before I met you, I was far from indifferent to you. We live, as I hope you know, Mr. Worthing, in an age of ideals. The fact is constantly mentioned in a more expensive monthly magazine, and has reached the provincial pulpits, I'm told. And it has always been my ideal to love someone of the name Ernest. There's something in that name that inspires absolute confidence. Ever since Algernon mentioned to me that he had a friend called Earnest, I knew I was destined to love him.
You really love me, Gwendolen?
Oh, passionately.
Oh, darling, you don't know how happy you've made me. But you don't mean to say that if my name wasn't Ernest, you couldn't love me, do you?
But your name is Ernest.
Yes, I know it is, but supposing it was something else. Do you mean to say that you couldn't love me then?
Ah, that is clearly a metaphysical speculation. And like most metaphysical speculations, there's very little reference at all to the actual facts of real life, as we know.
Well, to speak quite frankly, darling, I don't much care for the name of Ernest. I don't believe it suits me at all.
It suits you perfectly. It's a divine name. It has music of its own. It produces vibrations.
Yes, well, there are really a lot of other much nicer names. Jack, for instance, is a charming name.
Jack? Oh, no. There's very little music in the name Jack, if any at all, indeed. No, it's not thrill. It produces absolutely no vibrations. And I've known several Jacks, and they all, without exception, were more than usually plain. Besides, Jack is a notorious domesticity for John, and I pity any woman who is married to a man called John. She would probably never be allowed to know the entrancing pleasure of a single moment's solitude. The only really safe name is Ernest.
Well, darling, I must get christened at once. We must get married at once. There's no time to lose.
Married, Mr. Worthing?
Well, surely. You know that I love you, and, well, you led me to believe, Miss Fairfax, that you're not absolutely indifferent to me.
I adore you, but you haven't proposed to me yet. Nothing has been said at all about marriage. The subject has not even been touched on.
Well, may I propose to you now?
I think it would be an admirable opportunity. And to spare you any possible disappointment, I think it only fair to tell you quite frankly beforehand that I fully intend to accept you.
Gwendolen!
Yes, Mr. Worthing? What have you got to say to me?
You know what I've got to say to you.
Yes, you don't say it.
Gwendolen, will you marry me?
Of course I will, darling. How long you've been about it. I must say that I'm afraid you have had very little experience in how to propose.
I only one I've never loved anyone in the world but you.
Oh, yes. But men often propose for practice. I know my brother Gerald does. All my girlfriends tell me so. Oh, what wonderfully brown eyes you have, Ernest. I hope you will always look at me just like that, especially when other people are present.
Mr. Worthing! Let's go record washers!
Mamma, I must beg you to retire. This is no place for you. And besides, Mr. Worthing, it's not quite finished yet.
Not quite finished what, may I ask?
I'm engaged to be married to Mr. Worthing, Mamma.
You are nothing of the kind. When you do become engaged, I or your father shall inform you of the fact. It's hardly a matter that a young girl can decide for herself. And as for you, Mr. Worthing, I suppose England would not be out of place on my part. And you, while I'm asking these questions, Gwendolen, will wait for me below in the carriage.
But, Mamma!
In the carriage, Gwendolen! Where in the carriage? inform you that you are not down on my list of eligible young men. But I'm sure that I can add your name after these questions, if they're what a truly affectionate mother requires. Are you, oh, excuse me, do you smoke?
Yes, I must admit, I do smoke.
I'm glad to hear it. A man should always have an occupation of some kind. There are far too many idle men in London as it is. How old are you?
29.
A very good age to be married at. I've always been of the opinion that a man who desires to get married should either know everything or nothing. Which do you know?
I know nothing, Lady Bracknell.
I'm glad to hear it. I do not approve of anything that tampers with natural ignorance. Ignorance is like a delicate exotic fruit. Touch it and the bloom is gone. The whole theory of modern education is radically unsound. But in England, in any rate, it produces no effect whatsoever. If it did, it would lead to acts of violence in Grosvenor Square. What is your income?
Between 7,000 and 8,000 a year.
In land or investments?
In investments, chiefly.
That is satisfactory. But between the duties expected from one during one's life and the duties exacted from one after one's death, that has ceased to be a profit or a pleasure. It gives one position and prevents one from keeping it up. That's all that can be said about the land.
Well, I have a country house with some land, of course, attached to it. About 1,500 acres, I believe. But I don't depend on that for my real income. As far as I can make out, the poachers are the only people that really make anything of it.
A country house? How many bedrooms? Oh, well, that question could be cleared up later. You have a townhouse, I know. A girl with a simple, unspoiled nature like Gwendolen's could hardly be required to live in the country.
Well, I have a townhouse in Belgrave Square, but it's let by the year to a Lady Bloxham. I can have it back any time I like, of course, at 6 months' notice.
Lady Bloxham? I don't know her.
Well, she's considerably advanced in years. She goes about very little.
Nowadays there's no guarantee of respectability of character. What number in Belgrave Square?
149.
The unfashionable side. I thought that was something. However, that could be easily altered.
You mean the fashionable side?
Both, if necessary, I presume, Mr. Worthing. What are your politics?
Oh, I'm afraid I really have none.
Oh,
I'm a liberal unionist.
They count as Tories. They're down with us in the evening, at any rate. Now on to minor matters. Let's see. Are your parents still living?
No, Lady Bracknell, I'm afraid I've lost both my parents.
To lose one grand, Mr. Worthing, might be viewed as misfortune. To lose both looks like carelessness. Who was your father? He was evidently a man of some wealth. Was he born into it? What the radical papers call the purple of commerce? Did he rise through the ranks of the aristocracy?
Well, the truth is, Lady Bracknell, I really can't say. I said I've lost both my parents, however, it'd be nearer to the truth to say that, well, they seem to have lost me. I don't actually know who I am by birth. I was found.
Found?
Yes, Lady Bracknell. The old Mr. Thomas Hardy, a gentleman of a very kind and charitable disposition, found me and gave me the name Worthing because he happened to have a first-class ticket to a place called Worthing in his pocket at the time. Worthing is a seaside resort in Sussex.
Where did this charitable gentleman with a ticket for a seaside resort find you?
In a handbag.
A handbag?
Yes, Lady Bracknell, I was in a handbag, a large brown leather handbag with handles to it, an ordinary handbag, in fact.
In what locality did this Mr. James or Thomas Cardew find this ordinary handbag?
The cloakroom at Victoria Station.
The cloakroom at Victoria Station!
Yes, the Brighton line.
The line is immaterial, Mr. Wilde. I confess I feel somewhat bewildered by what you've just told me. To be born, or at any rate bred, in a handbag seems to me to show contempt for ordinary family life, and reminds one of the worst excesses of the French Revolution. I suppose you know what that unfortunate movement led to. As for the particular locality in which the handbag was found, a cloakroom at a railway station was probably used to cover up some social indiscretion, and indeed I believe it has been used for that purpose before, as is hardly a matter for recognized position in good society.
What then would you advise me to do, Lady Bracknell? I needn't say I'd do anything in the world to ensure Gwendolen's happiness.
I would advise you, Mr. Worthing, to come up with some relations as soon as possible. Find one parent of either sex before the season is quite out.
I don't see how I could possibly manage to do that. I can produce the handbag anytime you like. It's in my dressing room back at home. I really think that should satisfy you, Lady Bracknell.
Me, sir? What has it to do with me? You can hardly imagine that I, or Lord Bracknell, would allow our only daughter, who we raised with the utmost care, to marry into a cloakroom and form an alliance with a parcel! Good day, Mr. Worthing!
Stop saying that ghastly tune, Algie. How idiotic are you?
Well, didn't it go off all right, old boy? You don't mean to say she refused you? I know it is a way she has. She's always refusing things. I think it most ill-natured of her.
Gwendolen is as right as the truth. As far as she's concerned, we're engaged. It's a mother that's completely unreasonable. I've never met such a gorgon. I don't really know what a gorgon is, but I know that Lady Bracknell is one. She's a monster without being a myth, which is rather unfair. Beg your pardon, Algie. I suppose I should speak with your own arms that way before you.
My dear, dear boy, I love hearing my relations abused. That's the only thing that makes me put up with them at all. Relations are simply a tedious pack of people who haven't the remotest knowledge about how to live nor the slightest instinct about when to die. It isn't.
Well, I won't argue the matter with you. You always want to argue about things.
Well, that's exactly what things were originally made for.
On my word, if I thought that, I'd shoot myself. You don't suppose there's any chance of Gwendolen becoming like her mother in about 150 years, do you?
All women become like their mothers. That's their tragedy. And no man ever does. That's his.
Is that clever?
Well, it's perfectly phrased. And about as accurate as any observation in civilized life should be.
I'm sick to death of cleverness. Everybody's clever nowadays. You can't go anywhere without running into clever people. The thing's become an absolute public nuisance. I wish to goodness we had a few fools left.
No, we have.
I'd extremely like to meet them. What did they even talk about?
The fools? Oh, the clever people, of course.
What fools?
By the way, did you tell Gwendolen the truth about your being Ernest in town and Jack in the country?
The truth isn't quite the sort of thing one tells a nice, sweet, refined girl. What ideas do you have about the way to behave to a woman?
The only way to behave to a woman is to make love to her if she is pretty, and someone else if she is plain.
That is nonsense.
So what about what about the profligate Ernest?
Well, I suppose by the end of the week I shall have to get rid of him. I'll say he died in Paris of apoplexy. Lots of people die of apoplexy quite suddenly enough.
Yes, my dear fellow, but it's hereditary. It's the sort of thing that runs in families. You'd much better say severe chill.
I'm not sure severe chill isn't hereditary or anything like that.
Of course it isn't.
Very well then. My brother Ernest is swept off in Paris by means of a severe chill. That gets rid of him.
But what about Miss Cardew? I thought you said she was a little too much interested in him. Won't she feel his loss a good deal?
Oh, Cecily's not a silly romantic girl, I'm glad to say. She goes long walks, has a capital appetite, and pays very little attention at all to her lessons.
I should rather like to see Cecily.
I shall take very good care you never do. She's excessively pretty, and she's only just 18.
And have you told Gwendolen you have an excessively pretty ward who is only just 18?
One doesn't blood these things out to people. Why, Gwendolen and Cecily are perfectly destined to be excellent friends. I'll bet you anything you like that half an hour after they've met, they'll be calling each other sister.
Women only call each other sister after they've told each other a lot of other things first. Now come, my dear boy. If we want to get a good table at Willis's, we really must go and dress. Do you know it is nearly 7?
It's always nearly 7.
I'm hungry.
I'm going to do you when you want.
What shall we do after dinner? Go to a theater?
No, I love listening.
Well, then let us go to the club.
No, I hate talking.
Well, we might trot round to the Empire about 10.
I can't bear looking at things. It's so silly.
Well, then what shall we do?
Nothing.
It's awfully hard work doing nothing. However, I don't mind hard work when there's no definite object of any kind. Miss Fairfax. Gwendolen? Gwendolen, upon my word.
Algie, kindly turn me back. I have something very particular to say to Mr. Wood.
Really, Gwendolen, I don't think I can allow this at all.
Algie, you always adopt a strictly immoral attitude towards life. You're not quite old enough to do that.
My own darling.
Oh, Ernest, we may never be married. From the expression of Mamma's face, I fear we never shall. Few parents nowadays pay any regard to what their children say to them. The old-fashioned respect for the young is fast dying out. Any influence I had over Mamma, I lost at the age of 3. But although she may prevent us from becoming man and wife, and although I may marry someone else, and marry often, nothing she can possibly do can alter my eternal devotion to you. The story of your romantic origin, as related to me by Mamma, with unpleasing comments, naturally stood at the deeper fibers of my nature. Your Christian name has irresistible fascination, and the simplicity of your character makes you exquisitely incomprehensible to me. Your town address at the Albany I have, What is your address to the country?
The Manor House, Bolton, Hertfordshire.
There's a good postal service, I suppose. It may become necessary to do something desperate. That, of course, will require serious consideration. I will communicate with you daily.
I don't mind.
How long do you remain in town?
Till Monday.
Good. Algie, you may turn your back now.
I've turned around already, thanks.
And you may also ring the bell.
You'll let me see you to your carriage, Miss Fairfax.
Certainly.
I'll see you, Miss Fairfax.
Yes, sir. Another glass of sherry, Lane.
Yes, sir.
Tomorrow, Lane, I'm going bunburying.
Yes, sir.
I shall probably not be back till Monday. You can put up my dress clothes, my smoking jacket, and all of the Bunbury suits.
Yes, sir.
I hope tomorrow will be a fine day, Lane.
It never is, sir.
Lane, you're a perfect pessimist.
I do my best to give satisfaction, sir.
Now, there's a sensible, intelligent girl, the only girl I've ever cared for in my entire life.
One of you looking so amused at.
Oh, I'm just a little anxious about poor Bunbury, that's all.
You know, if you don't take care, your friend Bunbury's going to get you in a serious scrape one of these days.
Well, I love scrapes. They're the only things that are never serious.
It's nonsense, Algie. You never talk anything but nonsense.
Nobody ever does.
Cecily. Cecily. Surely such a utilitarian occupation after watering the flowers is rather Hofmann for doing more. Especially at one where intellectual purchase await you. German grammar is on the table. Pray open it at page 15 to repeat yesterday's lesson.
But I don't like German. It isn't at all a becoming language. I know perfectly well I look quite plain after my German lesson.
Child, you know how ancient your guardian is, that you should improve yourself in every way. You laid particular stress in your German essays in the time today. Indeed, he always lays stress in your German essays in the time.
Dear Uncle Jack is so very serious. Sometimes he's so serious that I don't think he can be quite well.
Your guardian enjoys the best of health. It is rather your demeanor can be especially commended to someone who is so comparatively young as he is, and an who has a higher sense of duty and responsibility.
I suppose that's why he often looks a little bored when we three are together.
Cecily, I'm surprised at you. Mr. Wilde has many troubles in his life. Out of Merriman and triviality would be out of place in this conversation. You must remember his constant anxiety about that unfortunate young man, his brother.
I do wish Uncle Jack would allow that unfortunate young man, his brother, to come down here sometime. We might have a good influence over him, Miss Prism. I'm sure you most certainly would. You know German and geology and things of that kind influence a man very much.
I don't think that even I can produce any effect on a character who, according to his own brother's ambition, is irretrievably weak and vacillating. Indeed, I'm not sure I have the desire to reclaim him. I'm not here for this modern mania of turning bad people into good people at a moment's notice. The men sows, so let it breathe. Cecily, you must put away your diary. I don't see why you keep the diary at all.
Keep a diary in order to enter the wonderful secrets of my life. If I didn't write them down, I should probably forget all about them.
My dear Cecily, it's a diary we all carry about with us.
Yes, but it usually only chronicles the things that haven't happened or couldn't possibly have happened. I believe that memory is responsible for all of the 3-volume novels that Moody sends us.
And that's me slightly of the 3-volume novel, Cecily. I wrote them myself in earlier days.
Did you really, Miss Prism? Oh, how terribly clever you are. Well, I hope it did not end happily. I don't like books that end happily. They depress me so much.
The good ended happily, the bad ended happily, that's what fiction means.
Yes, I suppose so, but it doesn't seem fair. And was your manuscript ever published?
Alas, no, the manuscript was unfortunately never offended. I use words and scenes of loss to explain to your childish speculations of popular.
Oh, but I see dear Dr. Chasuble coming up from the garden.
Dr. Chasuble, this is indeed a pleasure.
And how are we this morning? Miss Prism, I trust you are well.
Miss Prism has just been complaining of a slight headache, and I believe it would do her so much good to go on a short stroll with you to the garden.
Cecily, I have not mentioned anything about a headache.
Yes, but I felt instinctively that you had a headache, and I was thinking of that and not on my German lesson when the rector came in.
I hope, Cecily, that you are not inattentive.
Oh, I'm afraid I am.
That is strange. Were I Miss Prism's pupil, I would hang upon her lips. I spoke metaphorically. My metaphor was drawn from bees. I suppose Mr. Worthing has not yet returned from town?
We did not expect him till Monday afternoon.
Yes, he usually likes to spend his Sundays in London.
He is not one whose sole aim in life is enjoyment, as by all accounts that unfortunate young man, his brother, seems to be. But I shall not disturb Egeria and the people any longer.
Egeria, my name is Letitia, Doctor.
A classical allusion merely drawn from the pagan authors. I shall no doubt see you both at evensong.
I think, dear Doctor, I'll have a walk with you. I'm fine to have a headache after all, but I'll straw might do it well.
With pleasure, Miss Prism, with pleasure. We might go as far as the schools and back.
That'll be delightful. Cecily, you will read your political economy in my absence. The chapter on the following penny may admit. It is somewhat too sensational. Even if it's how it probably chapter on the romantic science.
Oh, horrid political economy, horrid geology, horrid German!
Mr. Worthing, it's just Mr. Roger's luggage with him.
Does he know that Uncle Jack won't arrive until Monday?
Yes, miss. I mentioned that you and Miss Prism were in the garden. He said he was very anxious to speak with you privately for a moment.
Tell Mr. Ernest Worthing to come out here. I suppose you had better arrange a room for him.
Yes, miss.
Mr. Ernest Worthing, E4, the Albany. I've never met any really wicked person before. I feel rather frightened. I'm so afraid he will look just like everyone else. He does.
You are my little cousin Cecily, I'm sure.
You are in some strange mistake. I am not little. In fact, I believe I am more than usually tall for my age. But I am your cousin Cecily. You, I see from your card, are my Uncle Jack's brother. My cousin Ernest. My wicked cousin Ernest.
Oh, well, I'm really not wicked at all, cousin Cecily. You mustn't think I'm wicked.
If you are not, then you have certainly been deceiving us all in a most inexcusable way. I hope that you have not been leading a double life, pretending to be wicked and being good all the time. That will be hypocrisy.
Of course, I have been rather reckless.
I'm glad to hear it.
In fact, now that you mention it, I have been rather bad in my own small way.
Well, I don't think that you should be so proud of that. But I am sure it was very pleasant. I don't see how you're here at all. Uncle Jack won't arrive until Monday.
Oh, well, that is a great disappointment. I'm obliged to go out by the first train Monday morning. I have a business appointment that I'm anxious to miss.
Well, couldn't you miss it anywhere but in London?
No, the appointment is in London.
Well, of course I know how important it is to not keep a business arrangement if one wants to maintain any sense of beauty in life, but I still think you had better wait until Uncle Jack is back. I know he wants to speak to you about your immigrating.
About my what?
Your immigrating. He's gone to town to pick out your outfit.
I certainly wouldn't let Jack buy my outfit. He has no taste in neckties at all.
I don't think that you will require neckties where you're going. Uncle Jack is sending you to Australia.
Australia? Well, I'd sooner die.
Well, on Wednesday at dinner, Uncle Jack said you would have to choose between this world, the next world, and Australia.
Oh, well. Well, the accounts I've heard of Australia and the next world are not particularly encouraging. This world is good enough for me, Cousin Cecily.
Yes, but are you good enough for it?
That, I'm afraid I am not. That is why I'd like you to reform me. You might make that your mission, Cousin Cecily.
I'm afraid I have no time this afternoon.
Oh, well, would you mind my reforming myself this afternoon?
Well, that's rather quixotic of you, but I do think you should try.
I will. I feel better already.
You're looking a little worse.
That's because I'm hungry.
Oh, of course, how thoughtless of me. I forgot that when one is going to lead an entirely new life, one requires regular and wholesome meals. Won't you come in?
Thank you. Might I have a buttonhole first? I never have any appetite unless I have a buttonhole first.
A chrysanthemum.
No, I'd sooner have a pink rose.
Why?
Because you are like pink rose, Cousin Cecily.
I don't think it can be right for you to speak to me that way. Miss Prism never says such things to me.
Miss Prism is a short-sighted old lady. You're the prettiest girl I ever saw.
Miss Prism says that all good looks are a snare.
They're a snare that any sensible man should like to be caught in.
I don't think I would like to catch a sensible man. I should know what to talk to him about.
What's wrong with you, Doctor? You should be married. The misanthrope I can understand. A womanthrope, never.
Believe me, I do not deserve so neologistic a phrase. The precept as well as the practice of the primitive church was distinctly against matrimony.
That is obviously the reason why the primitive church has not lasted up to the present day. But you do not seem to realize, dear Doctor, that by persistently remaining single, a man turns himself into a public reputation. You mentioned you weren't careful. This very celibacy needs to be the best of your stride.
But is a man not equally attractive in marriage?
No married man is ever attractive except to his wife.
And often I've been told that even to her.
That would be my intellectual sympathies, uncle. Maturity can be depended on. Ripeness can be trusted. You young women are green. I spoke her unfortunately. The metaphor was gone from fruits. But where is Cecily?
Perhaps she followed us to the schools.
Mr. Worthing.
Mr. Worthing?
This is indeed a surprise we did not expect until Monday afternoon.
Return sooner than expected. Dr. Chasuble, it will go well.
Mr. Worthing, I trust this garb of woe does not betoken some terrible calamity.
My brother.
No shame for that extravagance.
Still leading his life of pleasure?
Dead.
Your brother Ernest, dead?
Quite dead.
I trust you will profit by it.
Mr. Worthing, you have my sincere condolences. You at least have the consolation of knowing you're always the most forgiving and generous of your brothers.
Poor Ernest. He had many faults, but it is a sad, sad blow.
Very sad indeed. Were you with him at the end?
No, he died abroad. In Paris, in fact. I received a telegram last night from the manager of the Grand Hotel.
Was the cause of death mentioned?
Severe chill, it seems.
As a man sows, so shall he reap.
Charity, dear Miss Prism, charity. None of us are perfect. I myself am susceptible to drowns. But we'll hear from him later.
No, he seems to have expressed a desire to be buried in Paris.
In Paris? I'm afraid that hardly points to any very serious state of mind at the last. You will no doubt me wish some slight allusion next Sunday. My sermon on the meaning of mind and the wilderness can be adapted to almost any occasion, joyful, or, as in this present case, distressing. I've preached at harvest celebrations, christenings, confirmations, days of humiliation, and festal days. And the last time I preached it was in the cathedral at a charity sermon on behalf of the Society of Prevention of Discontentment among the Upper Orders. The bishop, who was present, was much struck by some of the analogies I drew.
That reminds me, Dr. Chasuble. You mentioned christenings. I suppose you know how to christen all right. I mean, you are continually christening, aren't you?
It is one of the rector's most constant duties in this parish, I'm correct to say. I've often spoken to the poor classes on the subject, but they don't seem to feel it this.
But is there any infant which you're interested in, Mr. Worthing? Your brother was, I believe, unmarried, was he not?
Yes.
Most people who would live in childhood pleasures we are.
But the christening's not for any child, you know. I am very fond of children. No, the fact is I'd like to be christened myself this afternoon.
But certainly you've been christened already.
I don't remember anything about it.
Haven't you any grave doubts on the subject?
I certainly intend to have, although I don't know if the thing will make you uncomfortable in any way, or if you think I'm a little too old now.
Not at all. The sprinkling, and indeed the immersion of adults, is a perfectly canonical practice.
Immersion?
You need have no apprehensions. Sprinkling is all that is necessary, or indeed, I think advisable, however so changeable. But when would you wish the ceremony to be performed?
Oh, I might trot around about 5 o'clock, if that would suit you.
Perfectly, perfectly. In fact, I have 2 similar ceremonies to perform at that same time. A case of twins that appeared recently on one of the cottages on your own estate. Or Jenkins the Carter, those hard-working men.
I don't fancy being christened along with other babies. It'd be childish.
Admirably, admirably. And now I will not intrude on a house of sorrow any longer. I only wish you not be too bowed down by grief. What often the moment seem to us bitter trials, often blessings in disguise.
This seems to me a blessing of an extremely obvious kind.
Uncle Jack! Oh, I am so glad to see you back. But what horrid clothes you've got on. Do go and change them. Cecily!
My child, dear child!
Oh, Uncle Jack, do look happy. You look as though you had a toothache. And I have got the most wonderful surprise for you. You will never guess who's in the dining room right now. Your brother! Your brother! He arrived about a half an hour ago.
It's nonsense. I haven't got a brother.
Oh, don't say that, Uncle Jack. No matter how badly he's behaved to you in the past, he is still your brother. You would not be so heartless as to disown him, would you? Oh, and you will shake hands with him, won't you, Uncle Jack?
These are most joyful tidings!
After we had all been resigned to his loss, his sudden return seems to be particularly distressing.
Brother? It's in the dining room. I don't know what it all means. I think the whole thing's perfectly absurd. Oh, good heavens!
Brother John, I have come down from town tell you that I'm very sorry for all the trouble I've caused you, and I intend to lead a better life in the future.
Uncle Jack, you won't refuse your own brother's hand.
Nothing will induce me to shake his hand. I think his coming down here is disgraceful. He knows perfectly well why.
Uncle Jack, do be nice. There is some good in everyone. Ernest has just been telling me about his poor invalid friend, Mr. Bunbury, and how he goes to visit him so often. And surely there is much good in someone who leaves the pleasures of London to sit by a bed of pain.
He's been talking of Bunbury, has he?
He's told me all about poor Mr. Bunbury and his terrible state of health.
Bunbury, well, I won't have him talk to you about Bunbury or about anything else. It's enough to drive one perfectly frantic.
Well, of course I admit the faults were all on my side. However, I must say I'm finding Brother John's coldness to me peculiarly painful. I expected a more enthusiastic welcome. Especially since it is, well, the first time I've ever come here.
No, Uncle Jack, if you don't shake hands with Ernest, I will never forgive you. Never forgive you.
Never forgive me?
Never, never, never.
Well, this is the last time I shall ever do it.
Isn't it nice to see so perfect a reconciliation? I think we're going to get the two brothers together.
Cecily will come with us?
Certainly. My little task of reconciliation is over.
You have done a beautiful thing today, child.
We must not be premature in our judgments.
I feel very happy.
Scoundrel Alger, you must get out of this place as soon as possible. I don't allow any Bunbury in here.
I've Ernest's things in the room next to your own, sir. I suppose that is all right?
What?
Mr. Ernest's luggage. I put it in the room next to your own.
His luggage?
3 portmanteaus, a dressing case, 2 hat boxes, and a large luncheon.
I'm afraid I can't stay more than a week this time.
Aaron, order the dog cart at once. Mr. Ernest has been suddenly called back to town.
Yes, sir.
What a fearful liar you are, Jack. I have not been called back to town at all.
Yes, you have.
I haven't heard anyone call me.
Your duty as a gentleman calls you back.
My duty as a gentleman has never once interfered with my personal life in the smallest degree.
I can quite understand that.
Well, Cecily is a darling.
You're not to speak of Miss Cardew like that. I don't like it.
Well, I don't like your clothes. There's something ridiculous in them. Why on earth don't you go and change? It's perfectly childish to be in deep mourning for a man who is actually staying in your house as a guest for a whole week. I call it grotesque.
You don't stay with me as a guest or as anything else. You've got to leave by the 4:05 train.
Well, I certainly won't leave so long as you were in mourning. It would be most unfriendly of me. If ever I were in mourning, I should expect you would stay with me. I would think it very unkind if you didn't.
Will you go if I change my clothes?
Yes, if you were not too long about it. I never saw anyone take so long to dress and with such little result.
Many great friends being always overdressed as you are.
I'm occasionally a little overdressed. I make up for it by always being immensely overeducated.
Your vanity is ridiculous. Your conduct is an outrage, and your very presence in my garden is a complete absurdity. However, you've got to leave by the 4:05 train, so I wish you a pleasant journey back to town. This Bunburying, as you call it, has not been a great success for you.
I think it has been a great success. I'm in love with Cecily, and that is everything. But I must see her again and make arrangements for another Bunbury. Ah, here she is.
I was merely coming back to water the roses. I thought you were with Uncle Jack.
He's gone to order the dog cart for me.
Oh, he's going to take you on a nice drive.
He's going to send me away.
Then we must part.
I'm afraid so. It's a very painful parting.
Yes, it is always very painful to part from anyone whom one has only known for a very brief space of time. The absence of old friends one can endure with equanimity, but even a momentary separation from anyone whom one has only known for a very brief space of time is almost unbearable.
The dog cart is at the door, sir.
It can wait, Merriman, for 5 minutes.
Yes, miss.
Cecily, I hope I shall not offend you if I state quite frankly and openly that you seem to me in every way the visible personification of absolute perfection.
Your frankness does you credit, Ernest. If you will allow it, I will copy your remarks into my diary.
Do you really keep a diary? Oh, I would give anything to look at it. May I?
No. You see, it was quite simply a very young girl's record of her own private thoughts and impressions, and consequently meant for publication. When it appears in volume form, I hope you will order a copy. Now, pray go on. I I delight in taking down dictation. I have reached absolute perfection. You may continue, I'm quite ready for more. Oh, Ernest, don't cough. When one is dictating, one must speak fluently and not cough. Besides, I don't know how to spell cough.
Cecily, ever since I looked upon your wonderful and incomparable beauty, I have dared to love you wildly, passionately, devotedly, and hopelessly.
I don't think that you should say that you love me wildly, passionately, devotedly, and hopelessly. Hopelessly doesn't seem to make much sense, does it?
Cecily.
A dog cart is waiting, sir.
Tell it to come around next week at the same hour.
Yes, sir.
Oh, Jack would be very much annoyed if he knew you were staying on until next week at the same hour.
Oh, I don't care about Uncle Jack. I don't care about anyone in the whole world except for you, Cecily. I love you. You will marry me, won't you?
Oh, of course, you silly boy. We've been engaged for the past 3 months.
The last 3 months?
3 months exactly on Thursday.
But how did we become engaged?
Well, ever since Uncle Jack first confessed to us that he had a younger brother who was very wicked and bad, you formed the chief topic of conversation between myself and Miss Prism. And naturally, anyone who is very much talked about is always very attractive. One feels there is something in him after all. And I dare say it was foolish of me, Ernest, but I fell in love with you.
Cecily. And when was the engagement actually settled?
On the 14th of February last. Worn out by your entire ignorance of my existence, I determined to settle the matter one way or another. And after a long struggle with myself, I accepted you under this very arbor here. And the next day, I went down and I bought this little ring in your name, and I promised you always to wear it.
Did I give you this? It's very pretty, isn't it?
Oh yes, you've wonderfully good taste, Ernest. It's the excuse I've always given you for leading such a bad life. Oh, and here, in this box, is where I keep all of your dear letters.
My letters? My own sweet Cecily, I've never written you any letters.
Oh, you need hardly remind me of that, Ernest. I remember all too well how I was forced to write your letters for you. I wrote always 3 times a week and sometimes oftener.
Oh, do let me read them, Cecily.
I couldn't possibly. They would make you fart, you conceded. The 3 that you wrote to me after I first broke off our engagement are so beautiful and so badly spelled that even now when I read them, I get no crying a little.
Was our engagement ever broken off?
Oh, yes, of course. You may read my entry if you like. March 22nd. Today, I broke off my engagement with Ernest. I feel it is better to do so. The weather still continues charming.
What on earth had I done, Cecily? I'd done nothing at all. It hurts me very much to hear you broke it off. Particularly when the weather was so charming.
Darling, it would have hardly been a really serious engagement if it had not broken off at least once. And I forgave you before the week was up.
What a perfect angel you are.
My dear romantic boy.
We'll never break off our engagement again?
I don't think I could ever break it off now that I've actually met you. And besides, of course, there is the question of your name.
Yes, of course.
You mustn't laugh at me, darling, but it has always been a girlish dream of mine to love someone of the name of Ernest. The name alone inspires absolute confidence. Why, I pity any married woman whose husband isn't called Ernest.
My dear sweet child, you mean to say you couldn't love me if I had some other name?
But what name?
Oh, any name you like. Algernon, for instance.
But I don't like the name of Algernon.
My own dear, sweet, loving little darling, I really don't see why you should object to the name of Algernon. It is not at all a bad name. In fact, it is a rather aristocratic name. Half the chaps who get into the bankruptcy court are called Algernon. Seriously, Cecily, if my name were Algie, could you love me?
I might respect you, Ernest. I might admire your character, but I fear I could not give you my undivided attention.
Cecily, your rector here is, I suppose, thoroughly experienced in all the rites and ceremonials of the church?
Yes, Dr. Chasuble is a most learned man. He's never written a single book, so you can imagine how much he knows.
I must see him at once on a very important christening. I mean, on important business.
Oh.
I shan't be away for more than half an hour.
Seeing since we've been engaged for the past 3 months and we've only met today for the first time, I think it is very hard for you to ask that I wait for such a period as half an hour. 20 minutes.
I'll be back in no time.
What an impetuous boy. I must enter his remarks into my diary.
Miss Fairfax has just called over to see Mr. Worthing on very important business, Miss Fairfax states.
Isn't Mr. Worthing in the library?
Mr. Worthing went over in the direction of the rectory some time ago.
Well, tell the lady to come out here, and you can bring tea.
Yes, miss.
No doubt one of the elderly women involved with Uncle Jack in his philanthropic work. You know, I don't quite like women who are involved in philanthropic work. It seems rather forward of them.
Miss Fairfax.
Pray allow me to introduce myself. My name is Cecily Cardew.
Cecily Cardew, what a very sweet name. I can tell we're going to be great friends. I like you already more than I can say. My first impressions of people are never wrong.
How nice of you to like me after we've known each other for such a comparatively short time. Pray sit down.
I mean, call you Cecily, may I not?
With pleasure.
You'll always call me Gwendolen, won't you?
If you wish.
And that's all quite settled, is it not?
I hope so.
Perhaps this might be a favourable opportunity for my mentioning who I am. My father is Lord Bracknell. You've never heard of Papa, I suppose?
I don't think so.
Outside the family circle, Papa, I'm glad to say, is entirely unknown. I think that's quite as it should be. The home seems to me to be the proper sphere for the man. And certainly once a man begins to neglect his domestic duties, he becomes painfully effeminate. Is he not? And I don't like that. It makes men so very attractive. Cecily, Mamma, whose views on education are remarkably strict, has brought me up to be extremely short-sighted as part of the system. So, do you mind my looking at you through my glasses?
Of course not, Gwendolen. I'm very fond of being looked at.
You here on the shore visit?
Oh, I live here.
Really? Your mother, no doubt, or some other female relative of advanced years besides you also?
Oh no, I have no mother, nor in fact any relations.
Indeed.
My guardian, along with Miss Prism, has the arduous task of looking after me.
Guardian?
Yes, I'm Mr. Worthing's ward.
Mr. Worthing never mentioned that he had a ward. Very secretive of him. It was more interesting hourly. Although, I can't help saying that news does not inspire me with feelings of unmixed delight. Cecily, I like you very much. I've liked you ever since I met you. But now that I know that you're Mr. Worthing's ward, I cannot help expressing a wish that you were, well, a little older than you seem to be, and not quite so very alluring in appearance.
In fact, if I may speak quite candidly, oh please do, I feel that whenever someone has something unpleasant to say, one must be quite candid.
To speak with perfect candor, Cecily, I wish that you were fully 42 and more than usually plain for your age. Ernest has a strong, upright nature. He's the very soul of truth and honor. Disloyalty would be as impossible to him as deception. But even men of the oldest possibly moral character are extremely susceptible to the physical charms of others. Modern, no less ancient history supplies us with many most painful examples of what I refer to. If it were not so, in fact, history would be quite unreadable.
I beg your pardon, Gwendolen, but did you say Ernest?
Yes.
Oh, well, it is not Mr. Ernest Worthing who is my guardian, but his brother, his elder brother.
Ernest never mentioned to me that he had a brother.
Well, I'm afraid they have not been on good terms for quite some time.
Oh, that sounds good. And now that I think about it, I don't think I've ever heard any man mention his brother. The subject seems distasteful to us. Cecily, you've lifted a load from my mind. I was growing almost anxious. It would have been terrible if any cloud had come across a friendship like ours, would it not? Of course, you're quite sure it is not Mr. Ernest Worthing who is your guardian.
Quite sure. In fact, I'm going to be his.
I beg your pardon.
Oh, I see no reason to keep the secret from you, dearest Gwendolen. Our little county paper will no doubt chronicle the event sometime next week. Mr. Ernest Worthing and I are engaged to be married.
There must be some slight error, dear Cecily. Mr. Ernest Worthing is engaged to be married to me. The announcement should appear in the Morning Post on Saturday at the latest.
I believe there has been some misunderstanding. You see, Mr. Ernest Worthing proposed to me not 10
Mr. Worthing asked me to be his wife yesterday afternoon at 5:30. If you would care to verify the incident, I do so. I never travel without my diary. I must always have something sensational to read in the train. I'm so sorry, dear Cecily, if it is any disappointment to you. But I'm afraid I have a private claim.
It would cause me more distress than I could possibly tell you, dearest Gwendolen, to cause you any mental or physical anguish, but I feel bound to point out that since proposing to you, Mr. Ernest Worthing has clearly changed his mind.
If the poor fellow has been entrapped into any foolish promise, I shall consider it my duty to rescue him at once, and with a firm hand.
Any silly entanglement my dear sweet boy has gotten himself into, I will never reproach him with it after we are married.
Do you allude to me, Miss Cardew, as an entanglement? You're presumptuous. On an occasion of this kind, it becomes more than a moral duty to speak one's mind. It becomes a pleasure.
Do you suggest, Miss Fairfax, that I entrapped Ernest into an engagement? How dare you! This is no time for wearing a shallow mask of manners. When I see a spade, I call it a spade.
I'm glad to say that I've never seen a spade. I see widely different.
Shall I wait tea here as usual, miss?
Yes, as usual.
Are there many interesting walks in the vicinity, Miss Cardew?
Yes, a great many. From one of the hilltops quite close by, one can see 5 counties.
5 counties. I don't think I should like that. I hate crowds.
I suppose that is why you live in town.
Quite a well-kept garden you have here, Miss Cardew.
I'm so glad you like it, Miss Fairfax.
I never knew there were any flowers in the country.
Oh, flowers are as common here, Miss Fairfax, as people are in London.
Personally, I cannot understand how anybody manages to exist in the country, if anybody who is anybody does. The country always bores me to death.
I believe that this is what the newspapers are referring to as agricultural depression, is it not? The aristocracy are suffering a great deal from it, so I've been told. It is almost an epidemic among them, I hear. Would you like tea, Miss Fairfax?
Thank you. Detestable girl, but I require it. No, thank you. Sugar is not fashionable anymore.
Cake. Or bread and butter.
Bread and butter. Cake is rarely seen in the best houses nowadays.
Hand that to Miss Fairfax.
You have filled my tea with lumps of sugar, and then I asked, most distinctly, for bread and butter. You have given me cake. I am known for the gentleness of my disposition and the extraordinary sweetness of my nature, but I warn you, Miss Cardew, you may go too far.
See, my poor, sweet, innocent, trusting boy from the machinations of any other girl. There are no lengths to which I would not go.
I felt from the first that you were not to be trusted. I felt that you were false and deceitful. My first impressions are very brief.
It is clear to me, Miss Fairfax, that I am trespassing on your valuable time. No doubt you have many other calls of a similar character to make about the neighborhood.
Ernest, my own Ernest!
Gwendolen, darling!
A moment. May I ask, are you engaged to be married to this young lady?
To little Cecily? No, of course not. Never put such a ridiculous idea into your pretty little head.
Thank you. You may.
I knew there was some misunderstanding. The gentleman whose arm is at present around your waist is my guardian, Mr. John Worthing.
I beg your pardon.
This is Uncle Jack. Oh, Jack! Oh, here comes Ernest.
Cecily, my own love.
A moment. May I ask, are you engaged to be married to this young lady?
To which young lady? Good heavens, Gwendolen?
Yes, the good heavens, Gwendolen.
Of course not. What could have put such a silly idea into your pretty little head?
Thank you, you may.
Knew there must have been some slight error. The man whose arm is present around your waist is my cousin, Mr. Algernon Moncrief.
Algernon Moncrief! Are you called Algernon?
I'll deny it.
Is your name really John?
I could deny it if I liked. I could deny anything if I liked. But my name is John. It's been John for years.
Oh, a gross misconception has been practiced on us both. My poor Cecily. There is just one question I wish to be allowed to ask my guardian.
An admirable idea. There's just one question I would like to be permitted to put to you. Where is your brother Ernest? You see, we are both engaged to be married to your brother Ernest, so it is a matter of some small importance to us to know where he is at present.
Gwendolen? Cecily? It's very painful for a man to be forced to speak the truth. In fact, it's the first time in my life I've ever been reduced to such a painful position. I've really very little experience in the matter. However, I will tell you frankly that I have no brother Ernest. I've never had a brother, and I have no intention of having a brother in the future.
No brother at all?
None.
Had you never a brother of any kind?
Not even of any kind.
Oh, dear Cecily, I'm afraid it's quite clear that neither of us is engaged to be married to anyone.
Not a very pleasant position for a young girl to find herself suddenly in, is it?
No. Let us retire to the house. They will hardly venture to follow us in.
No. Men are so cowardly, aren't they?
This ghastly state of things is what you call bunburying, then, is it?
Yes, and a perfectly wonderful bunbury it is, too. The most wonderful bunbury I've ever had in my life.
You have no right whatsoever to bunbury here.
That's absurd. One has a right to bunbury anywhere one chooses. Every serious bunburyist knows that.
Serious bunburyist, good heavens.
Well, one must be serious about something if one wants to have any amusement in life. If you're serious about everything, I should fancy, of an absolutely trivial nature.
The only small satisfaction I have in the whole of this wretched business is that your friend Bunbury is quite exploded. You won't be able to run down to the country quite so often as you used to do, dear Algernon. Very good thing, too.
Your brother Ernest is a little off color, isn't he? He'll disappear to London quite so frequently as your freaking.
As for your conduct towards Miss Cardew, I think it's perfectly disgraceful you're taking in a sweet, simple, innocent girl like that, to mention nothing of the fact that she's my ward.
I would see no possible defense at all for your deceiving a brilliant, clever, thoroughly experienced girl like Miss Fairfax, to say nothing of the fact that she is my cousin.
I wanted to be married to Gwendolen. That is all. I loved her.
Well, I simply wanted to be engaged to Cecily. I adore her.
There's certainly no chance of your marrying Miss Cardew.
I should think it very unlikely you and Miss Fairfax will ever be united.
It's no business of yours.
Well, even if it was my business, I wouldn't talk about it. It's very vulgar to talk about one's business. Only stockbrokers do that, and then merely at dinner parties.
How you can sit there calmly eating muffins when we're in this horrible trouble, I can't make out. You seem to me to be perfectly heartless.
Well, I can't eat muffins in an agitated manner. The butter would probably get on my cuffs. Muffins quite calmly is the only way to eat them.
It's perfectly heartless you're eating muffins at all under the circumstances.
Well, when I am in trouble, eating is the only thing that consoles me. And indeed, when I am in really great trouble, as anyone who knows me intimately will tell you, I refuse everything except food and drink. At the present moment, I am eating muffins because I am unhappy. Besides, I'm particularly fond of muffins.
There's no reason you should eat them all in that greedy way.
Jack, I wish you would have some tea cake. I don't like tea cake.
There's a supposed man that eat his own muffins in his own garden.
Well, you said it was perfectly heartless eating muffins.
I said it was perfectly heartless of you under the circumstances. That's a very different thing.
That may be, but the muffins are the same.
I wish to goodness you'd go.
You can't possibly ask me to go without having some dinner. I never go anywhere without my dinner. Nobody ever does, except for vegetarians and people like that. Besides, I've just made arrangements for Dr. Chasuble to be christened at 5:45 under the name of Earnest.
My dear boy, the sooner you give up that nonsense, the better. I've made arrangements myself with Dr. Chasuble to be christened at 5:30, and I naturally will take the name of Ernest. Gwendolen would wish it. We can't both be called Ernest. That's absurd. Besides, I've perfect right to be christened if I like. There's no evidence whatsoever to suggest I was ever christened by anybody. I should think it extremely probable I never was. And so does Dr. Chasuble. It's completely different in your case. You've been christened already.
Yes, but I've not been christened in years.
Yes, but you've been christened.
Well, so I know my constitution can stand it. If you were not quite sure about your having ever been christened, I must say I think it rather dangerous you're venturing on it now. It might make you very unwell. You can hardly have forgotten that someone very closely connected with you was very nearly carried off in Paris this week by a severe chill.
Yourself, a severe chill isn't hereditary.
Well, it used to be, I know, but I dare say it is now. Science is always making wonderful improvements.
Nonsense. You're always talking nonsense.
Jack, you were at the muffins again. I wish you wouldn't. There is only one left.
But I don't like tea cake.
Then why on earth do you allow it to be served for our guests? What ideas you have in hospitality?
I've already told you to go. Why don't you leave? I don't want you here.
Well, I haven't quite finished my tea yet. And there's still one muffin left.
As anyone else would have done, seems to me to suggest that they have some sense of shame left. They have been eating muffins.
It looks like repentance.
They don't seem to notice us at all. Couldn't you call?
But I haven't got a call.
They're looking at us. What if run they're approaching?
That's very forward.
Let us preserve a dignified silence.
Certainly. It is the only thing to do.
This dignified silence seems to produce a most distasteful effect.
Yes, quite unpleasant.
Mr. Worthing, there's just one question I must be allowed to put to you.
Yes, your common sense is invaluable, Gwendolen. Mr. Moncrief, kindly answer the following question. Why did you pretend to be my guardian's brother?
So that I may have an opportunity of meeting you.
This certainly seems a satisfactory explanation.
Yes, dear.
If you can believe it, I do not, but that does not affect the wonderful beauty of this reply.
True. Matters of grave importance. Style, not sincerity, is the vital thing. Mr. Worthing, what explanation can you offer to me for pretending to have a brother? Was it so that you might have an excuse of coming to town to see me as often as possible?
Can you doubt it, Miss Fairfax?
I have the greatest doubt of such. I intend to crush them. This is not the time for German skepticism. Your explanations seem to be quite satisfactory, especially Mr. Worthing. That seems to me to have a stamp of truth upon it.
I am more than content with what Mr. Moncrief said. His voice alone inspires one with absolute credulity.
You should forgive them.
Yes. I mean, no.
True. There are principles at stake that one cannot surrender. Which one should have the unfortunate task of telling them?
Couldn't we both speak at the same time?
An excellent idea. They always speak at the same time as other people. Will you take the time from me? Certainly. Your Christian names are still an insuperable barrier. That is all.
Our Christian names? Is that all? But we're going to be christened this afternoon.
For me, you are prepared to do this terrible thing?
I am.
To please me, you are ready to face this fearful ordeal.
I am.
Oh, how absurd to talk of the equality of the sexes. Where questions of self-sacrifice are concerned, men are infinitely beyond us.
We are.
They show moments of physical courage of which we women simply do not know.
Darling.
Darling.
Lady Bracknell.
Oh, good heavens.
Gwendolen! What does this mean?
Merely that I'm engaged to be married to Mr. Worthing, Mamma.
Sit down immediately. Hesitation of any kind is a sign of mental decay in the young and of physical weakness in the old. Apprised, sir, by my daughter's trusty maid, whose confidence I bought by means of a small form. I followed her at once by means of a luggage train. Her unhappy father is, I am glad to say, under the impression that she is attending a more than usually lengthy lecture by the University Extension theme on a permanent income on thought. I do not propose to undeceive him. Indeed, I have never undeceived him. I consider it wrong. But you must understand that all communications between yourself and my daughter must cease immediately. On this point, as indeed on all points, I am firm.
I'm engaged to be married to Gwendolen, Lady Bracknell.
You are nothing of the kind, sir. Now as regards Algernon. Algernon!
Yes, Aunt Augusta?
Is this the house where your friend Mr. Bunbury resides?
Oh, no. Bunbury is somewhere else at present. In fact, Bunbury is dead.
Dead? Mr. Bunbury died. It must have been extremely sudden.
No, I killed Bunbury this afternoon. I mean, Bunbury died this afternoon.
What did he die of?
Bunbury? Oh, he was quite exploded.
Exploded? Was he the victim of a revolutionary outrage? I had no idea that Mr. Bunbury was related with social indiscretions. Well, if so, he is well punished for his morbidity.
My dear Aunt Augusta, I mean, he was found out. The doctors found out Bunbury could not live anymore. That is what I mean. So Bunbury died.
But he seems to have had great confidence in the opinion of his physicians. Well, I am glad at the last that he came to some conclusion. Now that Mr. Bunbury is out of the way, would you please tell me, Mr. Worthing, who that young person who, my nephew, seems to be holding hands in the most unnecessary manner?
That young lady is Miss Cecily Cardew, my ward.
I'm engaged to be married to Cecily, Aunt Augusta.
I beg your pardon.
Mr. Moncrief and I are engaged to be married, Lady Bracknell.
I don't know if there's anything peculiarly exciting in this air of Hertfordshire. The amount of marriages seems to be quite above what statistics have laid down for us. Well, I suppose some inquiry would not be out of place on my part. Mr. Worthing, is Miss Cardew in any way related to any of the larger railway stations in London? I merely require information. Until yesterday, I had no idea that anyone's origin was a terminus.
Miss Cardew is the granddaughter of the late Mr. Thomas Cardew of 149 Belgrave Square Southwest. Gervais Park, Dorking, Surrey, Sporran, Fifeshire, New Brunswick.
3 addresses inspire confidence even in tradesmen. But what proof have I of their authenticity?
Carefully preserved the court guides of the period. They're open to your inspection, Lady Bracknell.
I have known strange errors in that publication.
Miss Cardew's family solicitors are Messrs. Markby, Markby, and Markby.
Markby, Markby, and Markby, a firm of the highest regard. They are the top in their profession. Indeed, I am told that one of the Mr. Markbys is occasionally to be seen at dinner parties. So far, I am satisfied.
How extremely generous of you, Lady Bracknell. I have in my possession as well, you'll be pleased to hear, certificates of Miss Cardew's birth, baptism, whooping cough, registration, vaccination, confirmation, and the measles, both of the German and English variety.
Ha! A life filled with incidents, I see. I'm not in favor of premature experiences. Come, Gwendolen. We must get to the train stations. As regards does she have any small fortune?
Oh, about £130,000 in the funds. That is all. So nice to have seen you, Lady Bracknell. Goodbye.
Moment, Mr. Worthing. £130,000 and in the funds. Miss Cardew is suddenly an extremely attractive young girl now I look at her. Come here, sweet child. Dear child, your dress is sadly simple, and your hair looks as if nature might have left it. But that can easily be altered. A well-experienced French maid can produce an amazing result in a short period of time. Why, I remember I recommended one to young Lady Lansing, and after 3 months her own husband did not know her.
After 6 months, nobody knew her.
Kindly turn round, sweet child. No, this side view is what I wanted. Ah, yes, the distinct social possibilities in your profile. The chin a little higher, dear. Chins are one extremely high at present. Algernon,
Yes, Aunt Augusta?
The distinct social possibilities in Miss Cardew's profile.
Cecily is the dearest, sweetest, prettiest girl in the whole world, and I don't care tuppence for social possibilities.
Don't speak disrespectfully of the society, Algernon. Only people who can't get into it do that. Oh, dear child, I suppose you know that Algernon only has his debts to depend on, and I personally am not in favour of mercenary marriages. Why, when I married Lord Bracknell, I had no fortune of any kind, but I never let that stand in my way. So, I suppose I must give my consent.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
Cecily, you may kiss me.
Thank you, Lady Bracknell.
You may also refer to me as Aunt Augusta for the future.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
I suppose that the engagement should take place quite soon.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
I'm not in favour of long engagements. They give people the opportunity of finding out each other's character before marriage, which I think is never advisable.
I beg your pardon, Lady Bracknell, for interrupting you. But this engagement is quite out of the question. I'm Miss Cardew's guardian. She cannot be married without my consent until she comes of age.
On what grounds, sir? Algernon's an extremely, I may almost say ostentatiously eligible young man. He has nothing, but he looks everything.
No, I absolutely decline to give my consent. It pains me very greatly to speak frankly to you, Lady Bracknell, about your nephew. But the fact is, I don't approve at all of his moral character. I suspect him of being untruthful.
Untruthful? Impossible! He's an Oxonian.
I'm afraid there be no plausible doubt about the matter. This afternoon, during my temporary absence in London, on an important question of romance, he obtained entry to my house by means of the false pretense of being my brother. Under an assumed name, he drank, I've just been informed by my butler, an entire pint bottle of my Perrier Jouet Brut 89 wine I was especially reserving for myself. Continuing his disgraceful deception, he succeeded throughout the afternoon in alienating the affections of my only ward. Subsequently, he stayed to tea and devoured every single muffin, and what makes his conduct all the more heartless is that he knew from the start that I haven't got a brother, I've never had a brother, and I have no intention of having a brother in the future. I told him so myself yesterday afternoon.
Mr. Worthing, I've decided to entirely overlook my nephew's conduct to you.
Extremely generous of you, Lady Bracknell. However, my own decision is unalterable. I decline to give my consent.
Come here, sweet child. How old are you?
Well, I'm really only 18, but I always admit to 20 when I go to evening parties.
A wonderful choice. Women should never admit their true age. Whenever they do, it looks so calculating. 18, but admitting to 20 at evening parties. Well, being that you are almost of age, I suppose your guardian's consent is nothing of much importance after all.
Pray excuse me for interrupting you yet again, Lady Bracknell. But I think it only fair to tell you that according to the terms of Mr. Cardew's will, Cecily does not become of age until she's 35.
That's not a grave objection. Many women in London society have remained 35 for years. Lady Doubleton is a case in point. Why, she's remained at the age of 35 ever since she arrived at the age of 40, which was many years ago now. I don't see why our dear Cecily will not be even more attractive at the age you mentioned than she is at present. And plus, there'll be a large accumulation of property.
Algie, could you wait for me until I was 35?
Of course I could, Cecily. You know I could.
Yes, I felt it instinctively. But I could not wait so long. I don't like waiting for anything for even 5 minutes. I'm not punctual myself, I know, but I do like punctuality in others, and waiting even to be married is quite out of the question.
What is to be done, Cecily?
I don't know, Mr. Moncrief.
Mr. Worthing, as your ward states positively that she cannot wait until she is 35, which shows a most impatient nature, I would request that you please reconsider.
But the matter's entirely in your own hands, my dear Lady Bracknell. The moment you consent to my marriage with Gwendolen, I will happily allow your nephew to form an alliance with my ward.
Mr. Worthing, you must know that what you suggest is completely out of the question.
Passionate celibacy is all any of us can look forward to.
That is not what I propose for Gwendolen. Algernon, of course, can choose for himself. Come, Gwendolen, we have missed 5, if not 6 trains. If we miss any more, it will expose us to comment on the platform.
Everything is quite ready for the christening, sir.
The christening, sir? Is that not somewhat premature?
Both these men have expressed a desire for immediate baptism.
At their age? You're pretty grotesque and irreligious. Algernon, I forbid you from being baptized. If Lord Bracknell knew that was how you're wasting your time and money, he'd be extremely displeased.
Am I to understand that there'll be no christenings all this afternoon?
I'm afraid as things are now, it wouldn't be of much practical value to either of us, Dr. Chasuble.
I'm grieved to hear such sentiments from you, Mr. Worthing. They savour of the heretical views of the Anabaptists, views of which I have completely refuted in 4 of my unpublished sermons. But seeing as your current mood is one that is oddly secular, I will return to the church at once. Indeed, I've just been informed by the pew opener that for the last hour and a half, Miss Prism has been waiting for me in the vestry.
Miss Prism? Did I hear you mention a Miss Prism?
Yes, Lady Bracknell, I was just carrying over to join her.
May I detain you for a moment? This matter may be one of much importance to myself and Lord Bracknell. Is this Miss Prism a woman remotely connected with education?
She is the most cultivated of ladies, the very picture of respectability.
It is obviously the same person. What position does she hold in your household?
I am a celibate, madam!
Miss Prism has been, for the last 3 years, Miss Carter's esteemed governess and valued companion.
Well, despite what I hear of her, I must see her at once. Let her be sent for.
She approaches. She is nigh.
I was told you were expecting me in the vestry, Dickon. I've been waiting there for an hour and 3/4.
Prism! Come here, Prism! Prism, where is that baby? 28 years ago, Prism, you left Lord Bracknell's house in charge of a preambulator containing a baby of the male sex. You never returned. 3 weeks later, after extensive searches of the Metropolitan Police, the preambulator was found in a deep, dark corner of Bayswater, and it contained a 3-volume manuscript of more than usually unnecessary and completely disgusting sentimentality. But the baby was not there. Prism, where is that baby?
Lady Bracknell, I admit with shame that I do not know. I only wished I did. The plain facts of the case are these. On the morning of the day you mentioned it, day that is forever branded on my memory, I prepared as usual to take the baby out in its preambulator. I had also with me a manuscript of a work of fiction I had written in my unoccupied hours. In a moment of mental abstraction for which I can never forgive myself for, I placed the manuscript in the bassinet, the baby in the handbag.
But where did you deposit the handbag?
Do not ask me, Mr. Worthing.
Miss Prism, I insist on knowing where you deposited the handbag that contained that infant.
I left it in one of the cloakrooms on one of the railway stations in London.
What railway station?
Victoria, the Brighton line.
I must retire to my room for a moment. Gwendolen, will you wait for me here?
If you're not too long, I'll wait for you all night.
What does this mean, Lady Bracknell?
I haven't the slightest suspicion. Coincidences are not supposed to happen in families of high regards. You well know.
Uncle Jack seems strangely agitated.
Your guardian has a very emotional nature.
Sounds as if he was having an argument. I dislike arguments of any kind. They are often vulgar and usually convincing.
Yes, stop now.
I wish you would arrive at some conclusion.
The suspense is terrible. I hope it relaxes.
Is this the handbag, Miss Prism? Examine it carefully before you speak. The happiness of more than one life depends on your answer.
It seems to be mine. Yes, here's the injury received in an upsetting of a Gower Street omnibus in younger and happier days. Here is a stain on the lining caused by an explosion of a temperance beverage, an incident that happened in Leamington. And here are the marks of my initials. I have forgotten in that extravagant mood I had them placed there. But that isn't that of mine. I'm just delighted to have it restored to me after all these years. It's been a convenience being without it.
More is restored to you than just the handbag, Miss Prism. I was the baby you placed in it.
You?
Yes.
Mother!
Mr. Wortham, I'm married!
Unmarried. Well, I do not deny this is a serious blow, but
Has the right to judge one who is suffered. Cannot repentance act out a white act of folly? Why should there be one law for men and another for women? Mother, I forgive you!
Mr. Worthing, there seems to be some mistake. There is the lady who can tell you who you really are.
Lady Bracknell, I hate to seem inquisitive, but would you mind informing me who I am?
Well, the news I have to give you will not altogether please you. You are the son of my unfortunate sister, Miss Moncrief, and consequently Algernon's elder brother.
G's elder brother, eh?
I always said brother Cecily happened to have ever doubted that I had a brother. Lady Bracknell, my unfortunate brother. Gwendolen, my unfortunate brother. Dr. Chasuble, you know my unfortunate brother. Now you're going to have to treat me with a bit more respect from now on. You've never behaved to me like a brother in your life.
Well, not till today, old boy, I admit. I did my best, however I was out of practice.
My own one! But what are you? What is your Christian name now that you've become someone else?
Good heavens, I'd entirely forgotten that point. The decision on the subject of my name is irrevocable, I suppose.
I never change, except in my affections.
What a noble nature you have, Gwendolen.
The question better be cleared up at once. Lady Bracknell, at the time Miss Prism left me in the handbag, had I been christened already?
Every luxury that money could buy was lavished on you by your fond and doting parents.
Then I was christened, that's settled. What was my Christian name? What was my father's Christian name? No doubt I was named after him.
Well, his Christian name, he was eccentric, but I'm sure that he had one. But after years of marriage and indigestion and the Indian climate, other things of that kind.
Can you perhaps recollect our father's Christian name?
My dear boy, we were never even on speaking terms. He died before I was a year old.
His name would appear in the army lists at the time, wouldn't it?
Well, the general was essentially a man of peace, except in his domestic life. But I'm sure that it could have been in any record for the period.
The army listings of the past 40 years, I hear. These delightful records should have been my constant study. Let's see. Him, General Simmons, Axby, Markby, what ghastly names they all have. The Moncrief. Lieutenant 1840. Captain, Colonel, General 1869. Christian names. Ernest John. I was told my name was Ernest, didn't I? But happy to have ever doubted my name was Ernest.
Oh, my dear Ernest, I knew from the first that you could have no other name.
It's very painful for a man to find out suddenly that all his life he's been speaking nothing but the truth.
On hand, I feel too short to change.
My own one.
Letitia.
Frederick at last.
Cecily at last.
Gwendolen, at last.
My nephew, you seem to be displaying signs of triviality.
On the contrary, Lady Bracknell, for I now understand, for the first time in my life, the vital importance of being earnest.